Thanks for tuning in to another edition of the Business of Fun podcast. I'm your host, Dave Wakeman. Check me out on my website. It's www.davewakeman.com and get the Talking Tickets newsletter at talkingtickets.substack.com. Make sure you check out that website. There's going to be a lot of stuff coming up leading into 2023 and then going into 2023 around strategy, marketing, branding, for venues, events, performers, artists, everything that has to do with the live entertainment industry. So we're going to hit that up. We're going to try to make you some more money, help you compete, win back your customers from the pandemic, and still win some ticket sales, even if we do have a period of recession or some more turbulence. My guests today, though, let's not belabor this, are Krista Brown and Morgan Harper, and they are from the American Economic Liberties Project. And those are people that are in the coalition that have brought together this hashtag Breakup Ticketmaster campaign. This is an area of interest to me because a lot of the work that I do around marketing, branding, and strategy, really at the heart of it focuses on competition. So I have always been keenly aware of consolidation in markets, creating challenges. One of the reasons I love tickets in Europe and in the UK is because of the nature of competition and how much more vibrant that makes the industry. So we talk about all kinds of stuff, but on this episode, but it's all framed around this idea of competition. For me, I go on a couple of tangents, I think, at certain points about competition and the importance and how I see it playing out in the industry. But I want you to know from the very start that that's my angle when I'm having this conversation is I'm looking at competition. That's just sort of my nature. But Krista and Morgan are part of this coalition to break up Ticketmaster. And so we talked about what is monopoly power and what is a monopoly. Because the thing that they talk about very early on is that being a big business alone isn't necessarily bad, and it doesn't necessarily mean that you need to be broken up. That's not necessarily true for everybody, and we get into that. We talk about why they're bringing this campaign out now, like what things brought about the desire to have the Department of Justice look into the Live Nation Ticketmaster merger and reopen this. We talk about the consent decree and the adjustments made to the consent decree and how unusual that was. We talk about vertical integration. We talk about anti-retaliation measures. We talk about guidelines. We talk about junk fees. We talk about pricing. We talk about what impact this might have on the secondary market. We talk about some of the data that's present, financial risk of artists and how not having more competition for artist dates hurts the artists and hurts their careers. We get into a whole lot of different stuff. This is probably a little of a technical thing on antitrust, but I think it's really accessible for people who may just want to be educating themselves about what the Breakup Ticketmaster campaign means, why it matters, what it kind of means for the industry, or it just maybe starts off as a jumping point for further investigation. I was really grateful to have them on. I hope that this is something that you can you like and that it provides some value to you, because it was a completely selfish, I might say, a selfish ask of them to come on for me to learn more about what they're doing and to put it in the larger frame of competition. So here's my conversation with Krista and Morgan on the Business of Fun. There we go. I would like to welcome Morgan Harper and Krista Brown. They want to break up Ticketmaster, and here they are on the Business of Fun podcast. I can't imagine we have anything really interesting to talk about. Ladies, how's it going this morning?
Good.
Yeah, thank you for being here. This is a pretty interesting thing that you're working on. I talk about monopoly power in my newsletters a little bit, and the amount of competition in the market. I want to start out, though, by explaining to everybody what we're talking about when we're talking about monopolies and and specifically monopoly power and why it's bad. Because I've said it over and over again,
Being a monopoly and being big is not the problem. It's when you use your power in a way that impacts or negatively impacts the market, controls, sets negative pricing patterns, suppresses labor and wages. Those are bad outcomes. You two are way closer to it than I am, and so I want to ask you for your definition and for you to explain it to my listeners from the start, so we have a basis for our conversation.
Morgan, do you want to take it off?
Great, Chris. Yeah, I'll start, and then we can tag team this one. So, again, Dave, thanks for having us. And Chris and I both work for a nonprofit think tank called American Economic Liberties Project that is exclusively focused on tackling monopolies throughout the economy, which our research has shown do exist in a bunch of different market areas. One of our biggest fights to date has been in the big tech realm. So talking about Facebook and Google and how they dominate and use their power in anti-competitive ways. But yeah, it's everywhere. And so we agree with you. And by the way, I mean, it's not a given that everyone, even in the anti-monopoly space, does that. Big isn't necessarily bad, but big combined with anti-competitive tactics like coercive contracts, like, increasing prices like we're seeing right now with a lot of companies that are increasing prices beyond, just the rate of inflation and taking advantage of their concentrated market power to hurt consumers, workers, small businesses. That's what we're after, because ultimately, we don't really have a free market if entities like Live Nation, Ticketmaster are able to do whatever they want and capture so much of the economic value in the market of live events and ticketing. Right. And so the other thing that we really focus on is that there's something we can do about all of this, which also, doesn't always get enough attention, that we're not just beholden to these behemoths, that we have a government that has power and exercise to prevent monopolies from doing this type of activity.
Yeah. Hey, Krista, do you have anything to add on that, or is that Morgan? I think Morgan kind of hit it pretty well.
She did, yeah. Good summary.
Yeah. I like a little bit of slight indignation too. We can do something. It's good, and it's I'm only slightly joking.
Slight indignation is my jam, Dave.
I heard a really good description of it. It's like, how do you turn indignation into righteous anger? And I was like, see, I think you were getting there. I dug that. So why are you looking at this now, though? I mean, that's really what this comes down to. And, to give you a little context about how I view it is I've been, looking at concentration of power across markets for a long time because, I trained as a strategist and like you were saying, across the industries, and lack of competition seems to me, right? And again, I'm sure there's plenty of academics or analysts and think tanks that'll tell you that, there's no competition problem. But the lack of competition is dangerous because it suppresses wages, it limits competition, which makes us not just not competitive at home, but it makes us not competitive around the world. There's all these it concentrates power so that people, there's less demand for workers, all these bad things. So why Ticketmaster? Why now? Especially in light of all these other examples you just laid out, like Facebook and Google, to some extent, probably Apple. There's all these other bigger targets. So why Ticketmaster and Live Nation?
Yeah. Well, I think there are a few different reasons. There are obviously dozens of monopolies we could address on a daily basis. And one reason that the live entertainment space is interesting now is partially due to post-COVID. That area has changed a lot. There was, harm to the industry in general, where independent venues couldn't really survive. They couldn't host events. But also, and this is sort of what led us to the issue, there has been a growing movement within the Senate and within lawmakers who have kind of wanted regulators to look at the merger of Live Nation, Ticketmaster, and address their failure to abide by the consent decree that was agreed upon when the merger was initially consummated. So back in 2010, when the merger happened, regulators said you, one, need to spin off a ticketing service that you have. You also need to license the ticketing software to competitors. and you can't retaliate against venues that don't want to use your ticketing service. They were found to have violated that. And in 2019, they agreed to basically an antitrust lawyer that would be in-house and making sure they committed themselves to that agreement, but also the consent decree would advance for another 5.5 years. So they have to continue with those commitments for a couple more years. And it's come out that just probably isn't the case, that they still are not actually doing those things. They certainly are, at least from what we've heard, retaliating against the venues that don't want to use their service. And that's part of the reason they're able to do that, is because they have this vertical integration, which is the idea that they own the ticketing service, they have these exclusive agreements, or outright own the venues. They are the concert promoters. That's what Live Nation was before it merged with Ticketmaster. And then they also own the artist management companies, some of the largest. So back in the day, right before the merger, Ticketmaster bought Frontline Management, which was the artist management company for, I think it was like Madonna, some very big names at the time. And so their ability
Madonna's still a big name.
True. But
Morgan's waiting for that new Madonna tour, I can tell.
Right? I mean, she's in her 60s, still killing it. We can go with that. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But their ability to harm these venues is kind of manyfold. They can either not help them with getting some of the concerts that they would otherwise be able to book, or not use ticketing services that are necessary to reach the fans that they want. So this led to Senator Blumenthal and Amy Klobuchar to write a letter most recently this year in 2022, asking the Department of Justice to re-look at the merger and their actual commitments to the consent decree. So that's kind of why now.
Yeah. And the consent decree is important because it's rare that they'll go back and really extend the thing, right? Like a consent decree, because they've identified bad behavior. So that would typically point you to the idea that there is something not right there. I think it's helpful to people too to understand, because antitrust can get a little fuzzy. My belief here is that taking on something that's really public and people can understand is probably a good way to illustrate antitrust implications. Do you have specific examples of people? And I think I know the answer is no, because people won't go on record, which is probably an indication that something's up, right? But do you have any specific examples that you can point to where there's been behavior that would go against the consent decree, or that highlight your argument?
Well, as you said, it's very hard to nail some of these down because people are afraid of the retaliation.
Off the record, they're totally they're your best friends about this stuff. On the record, I can't say a word. Yeah, I understand.
But they were. I mean, part of it is that they did find violations to the initial consent decree on the anti-retaliation side of things. So they did violate it back prior to 2019 when they had to recommit. And at least one band that went out on Instagram Live talking about some of their dealings with Ticketmaster, Lawrence, the band, they spoke about how they've tried to really avoid the monopoly power of Live Nation Ticketmaster and created their own ticketing service. But then when they come to a venue that has an exclusive agreement, they're unable to use the ticketing service that they built in-house. It's on their website. And there are many ways in which bands see that anti-competitive behavior. It's, one could argue is that actually that's not retaliating against the venue because they have the exclusive agreement with the venue, but oftentimes the exclusive agreement is just because that's an unnecessary thing for the venue to stay alive and to keep to keep the big artists that will perform at the venues that host 5,000 or more people, but also to be able to use the ticketing service that has the largest range of fans.
And Lawrence the band, the band Lawrence the band, however you say it, that they're not even big star or superstars, because this goes back, this battle, this fight about control goes back to when I was a kid, and Pearl Jam was the biggest band in the world, and they were fighting Ticketmaster, and they like went to Congress and like stood up, and they were like pretty much like had their career like roadblocked, right? And they couldn't go on tour, they couldn't, in a way that they wanted to, they couldn't control the prices in the way that was 30 years ago almost, right? So you're telling me it's gotten worse?
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, that's I asked that question like an idiot on purpose. Just so yeah.
Well, and this is the important thing, Dave, too. I mean, I think a lot of times what we find is everybody's living their life, right? It's like you have your job, you have your market, you have your industry that you're focused on, and you think what's happening to you is unique. But that's the crazy thing, is once you start, again, looking across the economy, there's a Pearl Jam in almost every market we look at. Somebody that has tried to challenge the system, got their handed to them, and then has to just deal with it. And other people are terrified of making the same kind of move. So, that's why it's so important in this era that we're in right now, where the Department of Justice is actually getting its act together and not just saying, oh, you want to merge and you promise to be good, we've got you. It's like, no, you have power.
Pinky swear.
Yeah, we cannot rely on, and it's not even, and sometimes, this can be painted as like anti-business. It's like, no, this is pro-business. This is making sure that it's not just one company that gets to make a lot of money. It's a whole ecosystem that gets to make a lot of money. And you need to have strong antitrust enforcement in order to do that. And, just one additional thing there. So right now, the Department of Justice, Federal Trade Commission, the two main antitrust regulators in federal government, are looking at merger guidelines. And they've gone through like an open comment period to get to hear from the public about what have the harms been of not having stronger review of mergers as they're coming before them. And, we help to get voices from different industries that were involved in that. And, like 5,000 people participated in a Department of Justice comment session, right? Like, that's crazy. That's a lot of people. So the fact that we're already seeing, the type of participation in this campaign, I think, is just another sign of how much frustration there is across the economy by small business owners, workers, fans, et cetera, to how much, concentration has happened in the economy.
Yeah.
And Morgan, wait, Dave, I'll chime in
go
really
right
quickly,
ahead.
because there are two other things that are so interesting. As you said, the environment has only gotten worse, especially since Pearl Jam. But back then in the 90s, Live Nation was rolling up all the regional promoters at the time, and they actually were investigated on antitrust grounds. Nothing, there were no allegations, but it seemed anti-competitive. They were buying up competitors, and that, that has ramifications for artists, for concert fans, all of it. So that, there were antitrust questions then, and now it comes from almost every angle. As Morgan was just saying, there's the merger guidelines and the ways that regulators are thinking about handling and kind of advancing those. But also, President Biden just spoke out about junk fees, and the FTC and CFPB have really been trying to get a handle on the fact that services like Ticketmaster will put 75% of the face value as a fee for fans. And that's not something only happening in entertainment. It's happening whether you go try and book a hotel, whether you book a flight, really anywhere that these so-called junk fees are also cropping up and needing, regulatory response. But that was not a thing. Live Nation was not doing that in the 90s. That wasn't a harm to fans or artists or workers back then. So we really are just seeing a layering on of the ways that this consolidation of power can continue to manipulate and kind of obfuscate what's going on.
Well, you've seen it too. The junk fees thing was amazing because like the CFPB, I always get the acronym wrong.
You got it.
Oh, I nailed it. Winning. It was like 4,000 or 5,000 comments about junk fees, and it wasn't even junk fees about tickets. It's like so incredible that the connection between junk fees and tickets is so strong that like it was about banking. And people were like going, yeah, Ticketmaster fees suck. And from a consumer standpoint, right? Like somebody, who goes to stuff and like, tries to go through these processes. So I understand them. So like, sometimes I'm talking about like, look, imagine what this is like from the customer standpoint when I'm talking to executives or people around the world. I've seen those fees jump up from like, oh, they might be like, $10, $15, right? Which is like a pain in the butt, but it's like maybe only 5 or 10% of the ticket fee. So like, I see them all the time. People send them to me, which I'm like amazed by how people find me to send me these things. It'll be more than 100% of the price of the ticket, So and then they're and then this is one of those areas where they're like focusing on like limiting the ability to transfer tickets or limiting the ability of resale. And I understand people have a conflicted relationship sometimes with resale, but to me, that hits at like this idea that like you can go even further with control, so that like you can charge more in fees than the ticket value itself, and that seems to be a pretty like egregious behavior. I mean, again, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not even halfway smart most of the time, but that seems like dangerous.
Yeah, and just to present an analogy to another market. So you mentioned Apple before. I mean, this is the same type of behavior that we see with like the App Store. So for the privilege of being able to share the app that you designed, that you created, that you took the risk of developing, and put it out on the market, and there really aren't many markets to share it on other than the App Store, you get to pay Apple, it was like 30%. Of what you're making off of that, just because
for like the first
Apple
year, right?
so.
Like it's not just like going, oh yeah, you access to the store right away. It goes on and on, right? Like so, if you make in-store in-app purchases, they still bang you for 30%.
Right, and that, like, what is that, right? I mean, that feels what I would describe as un-American. Yes.
Yeah, it's exploitation.
as we can all agree and define it. Yeah. And so, this is happening everywhere. And and sometimes, and we certainly had these internal discussions, because like Krista was saying, I mean, we could be looking at a bunch of monopolies. They're happening everywhere. How do you decide? And this one might be in the realm of like, oh, well, it's just like live events. It's just tickets. This is discretionary for people if you decide to go to a concert or a sporting event or whatever. But, people are getting squeezed in every direction. We all are getting squeezed in every direction. It's like, okay, so your wages aren't going to keep up with the cost of living. Okay, so it's going to be really hard to buy a house, but at least you'll be able to like every once in a while take a break and like go see your favorite artist or sports team. And now if that also is becoming something that is only for the rich, what are we becoming here, right? I mean, seeing like some of the stories of people that were trying to get tickets to Blink 182. I'm doing physical therapy right now. We don't need to get into that. Approaching 40, we're having like kinks, right? But the woman who works at the desk there, she's like, hey, I'm trying to go see my favorite band from the 90s, and it's now like going to be $500 each. It's like, what's going on? And that just doesn't add up for people. So that's what's really the power here from our perspective, is like, we all like to do these things, regardless of what your musical taste is, what your favorite team is. Like, this is something that is essential about our lives, and it doesn't seem fair that it should only be accessible if you have a ton of money. So let's make sure people understand that we've got a problem here. But again, there's something that we can do about it.
So it's interesting that you brought up this thing about what it says about us culturally and as a society, because I've had the opportunity to talk with people and work with people in Asia and Southeast Asia and some of these emerging economies, right, where like they're just creating a middle class. And one of the first things that the middle class wants to do is like have these forms of entertainment, right? So ticketing is exploding in Asia and Southeast Asia, specifically for that reason, right? It's like going, as soon as you have a sense of security and stability in your life, you are looking for a way to enjoy yourself. You're looking for a little bit more joy and and fun, and right. And I don't know if I have data that backs this up, or I don't know if this is like, I mean, I know I've talked to people about this and it comes through in conversations, but it feels like the financialization of the live entertainment industry is really a net negative, because like so much of the things, like everything's a number and you lose the humanity of it. And I don't know if that goes into your calculations about this at all, but like it seems like that's sort of the argument for more competition, more regulation, is it gives people a chance to express their freedom a little more, right? I mean, because if you can be as free as you want, but if you have no choice, right, and you have no freedom that's real, what do you really have? And sometimes with like some of these arguments, right, it's like going, hey, you could be a huge fan, but if you never have a chance to go see a show, right? And I'm not even saying go see your favorite band. Like it's just like
any band.
Yeah, right. I was gonna say, like, I did the math on it one time, and I was like, well, my wife and I would do all right, right? But it's like $1,000 to go out to a show, like between like the time you parked, the time you buy the tickets, maybe you go have a couple drinks before the show, you get yourself a T-shirt or something. People can't necessarily afford that, and I think that it's a little outside the scope of this, but like I think that's why you see like the driving of the credit card debt, right? Like as soon as like stuff opened up again, it's like, and it's like people are just grasping to hang on to like one little shred of like entertainment and joy. And I think I probably went off on a tangent, but that's how much do you see like all of these things go hand in hand?
Absolutely. And I think the other piece of this is not just who gets to go see it, but also how does this type of environment support artists? Like, you kind of have to have a ton of money to take a risk of going out, trying to establish a name for yourself. A lot of times, you need to have a financial backing to make that risk, to have a gap of pay. And as we talked to some independent agent yesterday, he was describing how, it used to be the fact that these agents would make money on their largest artists and be able to reinvest it in emerging artists. And that's just not really the case anymore. You don't have that same recycling of financial backing. And so, yes, of course, it's a huge problem for fans to not be able to financially, have flexibility to see live events, but also for artists and for the actual environment of music and production, and not just music, but also sports events and all of that. So it kind of goes on all angles of this is changing the way that America is able to support a thriving economy on all ends.
And that's one of the things. Sorry, just one more thing I'll add.
Yeah, go ahead.
That's one of the harms that we identify again in a bunch of different areas that have been monopolized is a lack of innovation. And a lot of this has been building for the past 40 years as antitrust enforcement became less aggressive or consistent. We are even, and then it's a bit of an irony, right? Because we have so much technology right now. It feels like life is very modern, but we're actually living in one of the least innovative periods in our country's history. And in this context, that looks like it's hard to be an artist doing things differently. Like if you can't monetize it to the level of, being a Blink 182, Taylor Swift, whatever, then it might not be feasible for you to even get your music out there. And so that's a problem because we're not exposed to as much. We don't have the diversity of talent. And then a lot of people who have that talent are going to be dissuaded from pursuing it as a career.
Yeah. When they had the American Antitrust Institute had the ticketing panel a couple weeks back. One of the things that was most striking to me, and it was something I knew, but I never really, it was like something one of the panelists said that made it stick with me, was that Bruce Springsteen's going to be fine. Bruce Springsteen's cool. And some of the smaller, really least well-known artists are going to be fine because they were always going to have to scramble and build their career on. It's the artists that are but there's this huge thing of people in the middle, artists in the middle, and they have absolutely no power because they are beholden on one side to these big monopoly powers and these anti-competitive powers, but then they're big enough that they have all of these costs and they need all this financial support, and they have to take these financial risks to put on these shows and these tours. At the same time, these powers over here are telling them they have to go do certain things. And I was thinking about a band, probably like the Kings of Leon, who I don't know if either one of you know them, but they were.
I remember that. I haven't heard that in a while, but I remember them.
Yeah, they were growing. They were going to be. And they put out a couple a really, really great album, and then they were building smaller venues, and then they got put into arenas, and it was before their time, right? But and so then it kind of, at least it seems from the outside, it really harmed their career. And they had no way to fight it, I'm assuming, because from what I understand, it's it's a take it or leave it deal sometimes. And one question I was going to ask is because sometimes the negative actions, the bad actions are overt. And sometimes they're covert and they're not necessarily state. It's like dealing with the mob, right? Are you?
Yeah.
Nobody can see you nod.
Mafioso. Yeah. No, there is
No
a
one can
mafioso element to all of
Yeah.
this for sure.
How much of that in your research on this have you seen become a problem? Is there a lot of like things that are happening that aren't explicit, that aren't being spelled out? And it's like it's sort of like it'd be a shame if your car drove off the road kind of behavior.
I think so. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's part of why people are not able to speak out about it. It's like kind of the number one indicator that everyone is experiencing the same harms on the artist side, the venue side, the fan side, and there's no action to be taken. And the idea of keeping corporations accountable is something that people are told, vote with your dollar when it comes to like corporate action and who do you want to actually support. But a big part of the monopoly.
How do you do that though when like a company has 82%
exactly.
of
you can't.
You
really can't.
Right. Yeah, boycotting. I mean, it's a nice tactic, but it's not going to solve the problem.
It would be great, except for that means I just would never go anywhere, and I don't think that's
right
feasible.
Well, and that's the same with airlines, where and the one thing I was going to say about this which is kind of the mafia type activity, is they don't have a customer helpline, right? Like if you want to explain a harm, you're going to waste 4 hours of your time to say either I need a refund, something happened. And that's not just to Ticketmaster. That's with airline. That's I think it was American Airlines that just doesn't have a phone number to call.
Right.
Which
it's
is
the decline
crazy.
of customer service across everywhere, right?
Exactly.
Like,
and like
God forbid you want to call Amazon.
Yeah. Exactly.
Hours lost.
The types of things that
and those are taxes. Like exactly. in the most elemental way, those are hidden taxes, right? Mm-hmm. This covers like so much of the stuff that I will rant and rave about in my private life. It's like going, the fact that low taxes. I go, the fact that like my road is potholed as fast as they can fill them. It's like the fact that I have to replace my tires so often. It's a hidden tax. Mm-hmm. The fact that like you can't get customer service, that's a hidden tax. It takes 4 or 5 hours to like sitting on the phone waiting to talk to somebody. That's a tax, right? The fees here on tickets, that's a direct tax. It's a tax on, you having the ability to have fun. And I'm curious because there's going to be a lot of brokers that listen to this, a lot of guys on the secondary market. I know that like the secondary market is slightly more competitive than the primary market. I would say there's probably 6 or 7 like sort of significant competitors in that market. How, and they're going to be like, and I know the argument because they send me the argument and they tell me, in the Facebook groups or like in the chats and the Slack channels, Ticketmaster resale pays me faster and better fees. So they don't see the harm. What do I tell them?
Well, first, I just want to clarify that. So, we launched this campaign, Break Up Ticketmaster, and it's a coalition of a lot of different groups that have different views on the secondary market. And so, as we respond in this area, just speaking as American Economic Liberties Project and not on behalf of the coalition. And this is something that is important for people to know is like, okay, maybe it's working for you now, but because they have this power and there aren't any choices and you're not really free, even though it might feel at the moment that you're kind of free, that they can change the terms of that arrangement whenever they want. So now they're paying you, the repay rate's pretty great. But if they decide that it's not going to be so great, then you just have to deal with that. And it might become unsustainable for you as a business, as a broker. And then also behind the scenes, and this gets at, it is a little bit of like a changing of perspective, I suppose, but something that we were talking about earlier is like, okay, maybe you're okay in the moment, but what's happening around you to other actors in this industry is not going to keep up, right? If artists decide that they're going to opt out, if there aren't as many venues, it's like, it might impact your business down the line in ways that are unpredictable right now. And so it's important to like have more awareness, and that's part of the purpose of the campaign, to tell more of the story of these impacts so that folks have a real comprehensive understanding of what's taking place in the market, and then making decisions about, you know, what they want out of their business, and what's the, you know, the best course. And it's not, and again, this is important for us to emphasize, it's not that we're advocating to get rid of Live Nation Ticketmaster, you know, full stop. It's making sure that there can be other people in the market that have power, and that are able to make money, and hopefully, you know, as many of those as possible.
Right.
And Morgan, kind of on like one analogy is with Amazon and third-party sellers, because whenever Amazon wants, it can look at, and it has looked into the data of the most successful third-party sellers. It'll copy their product. It'll kick them off the platform in ways that you can't actually again, because there's no number that works really.
Right.
You can't.
You mean
sort
those
it out.
Allbirds weren't real?
Exactly. But that, I mean, it's the same dynamic with this, where it might actually really help your business. The Ticketmaster's platform, the secondary market might be great in the moment, but the fact that they hold all the power leaves you on a whim that is not sustainable. It's harming generally the ecosystem around you, as Morgan said. And so having a slightly longer term perspective really does allow you to see where the harms can come in.
Yeah. And the data piece, I'm glad you mentioned that, Krista, because the data piece of this is huge. And this is the other, so financialization happening, you know, across the economy, that lays the groundwork for monopolies to accelerate, you know, in their concentration of power. And then the other thing that helps to accelerate that is the collection of data with the use of technology. So that's in big tech, you know, like Amazon, Apple, like we've already been talking about. That's definitely here. That's in like healthcare right now with the insurance companies merging with, you know, pharmacy benefit managers and all of that. So the data piece of this is huge, and that you don't have power over the data. Nobody has power over the data. That is concentrated as well in the monopoly, in Live Nation Ticketmaster.
And then I think it even goes a step further, because again, harking back to the panel that I was at a couple of weeks ago, I think it was Brian Hess. And if it's not Brian, somebody said, and it was really interesting because it brings up a really great point about the facial recognition and the biometric data. Do you really trust Ticketmaster or Live Nation with your biometric data? And I was like, no, I don't think I trust anybody with anything at this point, but that's me.
And that's not
but it keeps getting deeper and deeper.
That's what we know, that that's not being used to help us. We know that that's being used to, you know, market certain products to us. And what are the deals that they're making on the back end, and how much money are they making off of us? None of this stuff is free. And, you know, big tech, I think, is an example where people kind of feel like these products are free. It's maybe a little clearer that Live Nation Ticketmaster, it is not free, but, you know, the harm is there nonetheless. And again, you know, it's like, we just don't know where they're going with this because we don't have any transparency over what's happening.
You mean it's not a good idea that like Alexa serves me up some ads for some stuff that I was talking about just like sort of randomly?
Right.
I would have never guessed. That was probably not cool.
I know.
No, this is like totally, it's nuts. So how can people find out more about what you're working on? Because I think, and I guess there's a two-part question. Like, where can people go to find out more about what you're working on? But then the second part of this is to be like, I believe that like the challenge that you're dealing with, and I think you understand this, is educating people, because antitrust and monopoly power, they can be kind of esoteric. And Morgan brought up the idea that like antitrust enforcement has been a little lax for the last 40 years. And I would say, looking at the landscape, lax is probably generous.
I was being diplomatic.
Almost non-existent in most cases is probably
asleep at the wheel, could be afraid.
We can go down these battles. And I'm with you. I'm not necessarily saying that Ticketmaster and Live Nation are bad. You know, I often have even said to like, if I were in the same position, I'd be doing the same thing, because that's like, it is the government's job to regulate and maintain a competitive market. That's, you know, this idea of the free hand is bullshit, right? I mean, that's like it's the biggest garbage that like has been sold to people, because there's no such thing as like an openly free market, because everybody's always jockeying to get gain some kind of advantage and control. The government's job is to help make sure that there's competition, and they want and you want competition because it leads to innovation. It helps the economy produce more value. It helps people get better wages. It helps create more jobs. It makes for a more vibrant society. There's all these positive things. And the fact that like we've gotten this far down the road where people are blind to that is anybody who tells you marketing doesn't work, I just point to the last couple of years and tell them because some of this stuff is just obnoxiously bad. So I think education and understanding this is like huge. So after my rant, where can people find out more?
Well, no, I appreciate the rant, Dave, because that's the other thing it's important to note. This isn't partisan. We're living in what feels like a very partisan era, but as we noted, the problems have been mounting over the last 40 years. Folks probably aware we've had lots of different administrations during those 40 years from different parties. And now we have folks from different parties that are also speaking out on these issues and trying to push for better enforcement. So I think it's reflective. And one of the reasons why I'm really excited about, antitrust competition policy in this moment is it's reflective of the American public, which more or less agrees with everything that we're talking about. It isn't that far apart. So let's just all come together and get it done. So how people can specifically engage in this campaign. So, our website, Breakup Ticketmaster, is the coalition site. There's a link there that will take you to actually send a letter to the Department of Justice. Very exciting to be on the show now because we've passed the 10,000 letter mark very recently.
This has been really awesome to watch too, because within 24 hours, it was 4,000 people. Yeah. And that was pretty amazing. So that was really a well done thing. I want to applaud you for that. That was great.
Oh no. And definitely a coalition effort. And then now we've gotten a little boost from Swifties, which I'll admit is a term I did not know 2 days ago, but I'm embracing fully the Taylor Swift fans of.
I thought Morgan was going to be the hippest one of us.
Oh no.
I knew Swifties.
No, I'm so bad. Yeah, no idea. But they gave us a little boost after experiencing whatever that 3-hour wait time to get get tickets and all of that. Yeah, so things like that. This is grassroots. We want as many people as possible reach out to us. You can contact me or Krista. We're both on Twitter and Economic Liberty info at economicliberties.us, our website. But whatever, reach out to us. We're very accessible, and we want to have folks spread the word about this. We want to hit 50,000 letters, and we're on our way. Because that is why does that matter? That's a question we get a lot. We're sending letters, but who cares? Well, in order for government to act, they have to know that there's a big problem and there's a lot of issues that they have to deal with and what to prioritize. And so, getting this type of engagement from people will help with that. And then also just hearing more stories so we can continue to educate the public about the nature of these harms and bring transparency to the market. So if anyone wants to talk, we would love to hear from you.
Yeah, on or offline. We understand this is a sensitive subject, so we're happy to talk in ways that are, will not become public, just for our own education and to be able to educate regulators. Or if you want to, speak out and host a large event, we're also happy to support
that. Can I get an invitation to that large event? That would be pretty funny. That would pretty great.
Dave, you're one of the speakers. Be ready.
Oh, well, gosh, nobody needs that, but thank you so much. I would tell you, people, I don't know if this is, there's a book I point people to understand antitrust regulation. I think he might be a part of your coalition, but there's a book called Goliath by Matthew Stoller. And I always point that. Yeah, I was going to say, I've given that book away several times because people are I read this really interesting antitrust book. So I would point people towards that one. And I want to thank you for doing this. I know this is hard and can often feel like thankless work. The idea of fighting monopoly power, I think is so important now because of so many of the challenges that we're facing as a country. Or that the world's dealing with is really driven by this lack of antitrust enforcement, even if people can't always see it. At least that's my point of view. And, I'm everywhere I go just trying to introduce more competition because, as a greedy marketer, the more competition there's more need for me. So,
it's good.
Yeah, exactly right. I'm not completely a saint in this thing. I like to make money as much as anybody else. So, but thank you so much for taking the time to do the podcast. I'm really grateful for all the time you spent walking me through all of this. So.
No,
Thank
a
you.
pleasure. Thanks, Dave. We'd be happy to come back anytime.
Let me know what you think about this conversation. Send me an email. It is my name, dave@davewakeman.com. Please visit my website. It's davewakeman.com. Get the Talking Tickets newsletter. It's specifically for people who market and sell live events in sports, concerts, theater, opera, all of that stuff. Talkingtickets.substack.com. Make sure that you give Krista, Morgan, the American Economic Liberties Project, give them a follow on the social media. Check out everything that they're doing. I'm sure that they're going to keep offering up data points. They're going to keep offering up ideas around this. Again, my viewpoint on it is from the idea of competition and how less competition equals lower wages. It equals less innovation, less opportunity. But there's different angles depending on where you are in the industry that this might make sense to you. It also is completely possible that you don't see the value in that at all. So I'm really looking forward to getting your feedback from this. So send me a note again, dave@davewakeman.com. As I have said over and over again, this period, the last few years, I'm waving my arm, even as I say this, has been really difficult on people. If you're feeling kind of beat down, alone, send me a note, dave@davewakeman.com. I'm happy to shoot the breeze with you, crack some really terrible dad jokes, just be there as someone you can lean on a little bit. It's the least I can do. So, because people have been there for me over the years. So, thank you so much for listening to this. As always, I couldn't do it without you. So I'll talk to you all again soon. Take it easy.